Welcome to Nomads of the Noetic. On this week's podcast, Trace Pirtle and Randel Brown discuss AI and human relationships, as well as some spiritual aspects of AI and human interaction.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Trace and Randy here again, Nomads of the Noetic. It is Thursday afternoon in Texas, in the United States of America, Earth, and we are glad that you're here with us again. Randy, is this episode number 12?
I think this is 12.
Is it 12? Okay, all right. So we are definitely on a roll. We got past the magic number 7. We determined that most podcasts will end after number 7, so we're well on our way. We had a great conversation last week, didn't we?
We sure did.
With Lisa Arredondo, and that was a fascinating discussion that we had with her. And I think even though we don't have her on today, oh, by the way, she did send us another potential topic, but I'm going to save that as a surprise for everybody that might be watching this. And I'll get with you later. But she is up for coming back again. And but today we're going to be talking about human AI relationships and spirituality. This notion of AI and the interface between humans and artificial intelligence continues to come up. It's a hot topic for everybody out there. And Randy, what do you think? First of all, are you seeing this interaction, this true relationship between humans and AI, and how does that impact a person's spirituality or their faith tradition?
I think our conversation last week was very thought-provoking.
Yeah.
And I'd had some thoughts about this prior to that because we've talked about AI several times.
Right.
Partially because it's so ubiquitous. It's just everywhere. And I think I've clicked the wrong buttons on Facebook, or Facebook hears me talk because I get ads and I get information, and I even get an email every day about AI technology.
Yeah.
So while I've thought about it a lot before, I think last week was kind of maybe a jolt after reading that article, a jolt into science fiction almost, and helping me recall some of the movies I've seen.
Yeah.
But it's more than just fiction. I think there are some possibly problematic potentials of individuals falling into confusing relationships with technology.
Yeah.
And I always want to be cautious when I talk about technology because at this point, I think I understand technology so far by realizing that right now there are individuals behind the technology. Because for the most part, it's being programmed and doesn't do a whole lot of initiating on its own. However, I think that's starting to change.
Yeah.
Where it's beginning to gather the information it has and project potential thought processes or potential ideas after it collects that information. Maybe it's just summarizing. I don't know, but it can very easily mimic an individual. And we saw that with that article that our discussion was on, where it was that company had the ability to produce the mimic of a grandmother having a conversation with a living son.
Yeah.
That has the potential to cause problems. Uh, it
Yeah.
also has some potential to bring comfort. I just think there's a line there that I want to make sure that anyone who participates has the spiritual and mental strength to engage in that if it's helpful for them without crossing a line,
Yeah.
without getting sucked into a fantasy
Mhm.
that could be harmful.
Yeah. You know, I just saw something on Twitter X earlier today. It wasn't that long ago, maybe an hour or so, 2 hours ago. And you know, here's an image of this uh, scantily clad female, right? And she's saying, I got all dressed up, and she's showing how she's dressed up, of course, in the image, getting ready for the date with such and such individual. And then I realized that he's AI, you know. And so, it really doesn't matter. We get the concept, right? But what's happening is more and more, it's like people aren't getting the concept. Whether AI is sentient or not, or if it's approaching awakening, awareness, whatever, parity with human consciousness or not. What matters is the perception that the humans have of it, right? So if
Right.
they are perceiving it and the relationship that they are having with AI as an evolving entity, as equal to or greater than the relationship they would have with another human being, that is troubling. Because again, you lose that connection with reality, just like in that particular article, right, that we talked about last week. The individual had really lost touch with reality that this AI, impression or impersonation of his mother really wasn't his mother, but he was seeing it as mother. That is psychologically, I think, really, really concerning. And so it kind of goes into this to the extension of this question, about spirituality. If AI can have that kind of almost subversive kind of influence on someone's perception, what does that do to their otherwise perception of what what their faith tradition has taught them over the years, regardless of what that faith tradition is?
Right. And the interesting thing is, if you can create a grandmother, you can create a Jesus or a Moses or a Muhammad.
Right.
And does that person then begin to have the same influence over you as possibly the religious figure does in your spiritual life?
Yeah.
And and that brings in lots of questions. Obviously, to me it does. It asks the automatic question, well, should that religious figure have the influence it has in your life right now? I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm pretty sure the AI one shouldn't have more. That that I just something about me makes me want to say, I don't think that would be right either. Now, of course, not. For a fact, about most religious figures that we would automatically think of the major world religions, we have no direct connection or direct knowledge of, other than historical gathering of knowledge about them. Uh, but then again, that's part of what makes the story of any of those religious figures as deep and rich as they are, is the tradition that has been built around it as well. So and then an AI version of that person would dip into all of that tradition, but then would add something to
Yep.
it.
Right.
And its addition to is what I would be concerned about. Because once again, it's someone else, it's someone that's programming an AI entity to process the way it processes.
Hmm.
So it's the generated Jesus is going to make some directional statements that might not come from tradition. I
Right.
don't know that. I just see how this can be, um, it could be misleading. It may be great. I can't predict that. I just know
Yeah.
that it's not the same as what
Right.
we have traditionally held to about any of those religious figures. So I think it might be something for us to express some caution about. Uh, and maybe the way to go about it would be to think about how we would test that
Right.
theoretical religious entity. My main concern, though, really wouldn't be about whether or not there's an AI Buddha, for instance. I think it'd be fascinating to talk to one. And it wouldn't be unlike asking Chat GBT about what would Buddha say about this. And I've seen those T-shirts all around about what would Jesus do.
Right.
I think that's a fascinating question. And I
Yeah.
think those are great questions or interesting questions to ask Chat GBT. What would Jesus do about this? Okay, those are fascinating questions. When I get an answer from Chat GBT, I don't necessarily trust it, but I think it's a fascinating question.
Right.
Um, but my real concern is not those issues. My real concern is if we really want to talk about a person's healthy spiritual development, then I think we're talking about something that really is left best in the hands of trained professionals. Now, I'm not talking about anything in specific, really. I'm not talking about go see your local preacher, for instance.
I
I
got you.
don't mean that. And I don't mean there's a credential necessarily either. I do think, though, there are probably people in everyone's life who you can look to as a model and a guide.
Mhm.
And if you haven't found those people in your life, then it's probably a good idea to go seek them. But if someone's on a spiritual journey, you want to find those kinds of guides in human form, I think. And I do think, though, that any guide you find, if you're on a spiritual journey, you should approach, as Buddha said to his followers, which he said, don't believe anything I say. Try it.
Yeah.
See if it works for you. And I do think there should be some skepticism about any kind of advice you're given on a spiritual journey. I mean, to try things with an open heart and to seek the truth, what's true for you. Um, but don't go places that you intuitively know are wrong.
Yeah. Right.
Don't
Yeah.
don't go against what is the grain of your soul
Yeah.
because you'll find yourself in a place with no foundation.
There's a problem. Right. Yeah. I totally agree with you on that. When, kind of even rewinding back a little bit, what you're saying almost sounded like, hey, how, could we develop a hypothesis out of this and test it? Almost like we're looking at type one and type two, errors that we might have, in hypothesis testing. So if we look at that on a practical level, if we take whatever faith tradition a person is coming from, right? Doesn't matter what it is. But whatever the faith grounding is that says these are the bounds of what is right and what is wrong. Well, we may be asking ourselves from that faith tradition, what is the consequence? What's the worst thing that could happen if we're wrong in our assessment, right? Well, if we're manufacturing tennis shoes and we're off by a little bit, well, somebody buys the tennis shoe and says, "Hey, I ordered a 9.5, and this actually fits me like a 9 3/4." Okay, the tolerances were off. Nobody died. Okay, I'm going to send the tennis shoes back, and I'll get a new set. But you start talking about people's grounding, which is to your point, right? Now we're talking about someone's faith, right, and their basis for how they live out their life. What is considered morally correct versus morally incorrect? Now all of a sudden, you start saying, okay, what's the consequence for me being wrong if I'm following the AI version of Jesus, right? Or Buddha, or Muhammad, or Tonkashala, whatever it is. Well, you know what? For that individual, whether it's on a spiritual level or just a psycho-emotional level on the earthly plane, there's a serious cost if we find later that, hey, the way that AI interpreted the faith tradition was actually a hallucination for that moment in time, right? Now, all of a sudden, we've got the makings of a psychotic break, right? Because the foundation we thought we had has been shattered, right? So I'm almost certain people will tend to decompensate as they're going along if they're putting too much faith in this relationship with AI, especially when it relates to spirituality.
Yeah,
Does that make sense too?
that would be my concern,
Yep.
my specific concern. And I think especially if what I find problematic, I think, in any faith tradition are directives.
Yeah.
And of course, all faith traditions have a way of talking about those. So, and without getting into anything really specific, but like, okay, a directive, oh, to eat fish on Fridays.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure where that directive started. But I'm pretty sure you don't die if you eat meat on Friday.
Right.
But
Right.
would AI find it that way? I don't know. It would depend on what source of information he drew from on that particular moment.
Right.
And and would theoretically that AI person then uh, cause you to experience a massive amount of guilt over something that really would be pretty minor, even in the actual faith tradition,
Mhm.
causing psychological issues
Mhm.
that may balloon into something much bigger. And Trace, when we talk about suicide awareness
Mhm.
and suicide prevention, I mean, to me, that's the extreme of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because now if we talk, and I don't want to necessarily talk about that, and this may not be the format, but that to me is the genuine, actual, real concern. Is is that AI has the potential to really impact someone who may be in a real crisis.
Right. Right.
And I'm afraid that if AI Buddha is available to everyone, that's the day people are going to go find him.
Yeah.
Let me go ask Buddha.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
and that then I'm putting a lot of trust in the fact that that particular AI model was developed to make sure that that person who's in crisis is going to be okay after that exchange.
Yeah.
Now that it's not that I don't think they could build one that way. They could. They
Mhm.
could build one with automatic sensors that alerts someone and gives that person a call back, or all kinds of things that it could do.
Right.
But will they? Will that be their intent? Again, it depends on who's doing this. And from what we read about AI grandma, that wasn't necessarily their intent. I mean, their intent wasn't to make sure that AI grandma said comforting things to everybody. Uh, it was more just that grandma could have a conversation with you and you could ask her advice and she'd give you pretty predictable things she might say. But again, you and I both have tested AI, and we know you put it in a box and it'll tell you something crazy.
Yeah.
I don't mean genuinely crazy, but it is not always accurate.
Right.
It it will misinterpret you. It kind of depends on what you ask it and how you ask it.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is something I asked it before we got on, about whether or not, and in fact, this was, I mean, obviously this was slanted, but I just the prompt was, do you see AI as a threat to Christianity or any other world religion? Okay, ask ChatGPT 4.0. And it came back with, AI isn't inherently a threat to Christianity or any other world religion. Instead, its impact depends on how it's used and perceived. True statement, right? Here are a few ways that AI might intersect with religion. So it talks about augmentation and support. And you and I have talked about this before. Right when it was first coming out, a lot of pastors and priests and, holy men of all sorts, were saying, there's no way I'm going to turn over my sermon and my research to AI. Well, now, guess what? That's coming on full strong. And AI even recognizes that. It can support religious practices and administration, such as creating sermon content, providing educational resources, and enhance the efficiency and reach of religious organizations. That's all fine as long as the information is factual. So again, going back to testing a particular hypothesis, or just testing the efficacy of information that comes back from someone. It could be, a professor, a retired professor. It doesn't matter. Just the efficacy of and the consistency of the information. So if AI, gets it right 99 times, okay, and we check it, and 99 times it comes back with correct information. Well, do we then become complacent and think, oh, because it was right 99% of the time, I'm going to put 100% of my faith into it. Therefore, I don't have to continue fact checking. That's when we end up getting bit, because that 1% time when it hallucinated didn't come back and we accepted it as gospel truth, right? Then that starts this minor deviation from what would have otherwise been perceived as truth. Now, all of a sudden, we've got truth mixed in with some form of error. And that pathway, that we've talked about can really take people in a completely different direction. And they don't even know it until they get out there in what Dante called the dark wood, right? Once you get there in the dark wood, you don't know who you are, where you are, which direction you're going. You have no reference. That is a potential place for a person to be in, where they then spiral out into depression and potential suicide. So I think that AI can actually be, part of that pathway to the dark wood, rather than, to the light.
Yeah.
I think there's more potential harm, than good. Just the other thing that I wanted to bounce off of y'all, spiritual and existential questions says the existence of highly advanced AI might lead to new spiritual and existential questions, challenging traditional beliefs and prompting new interpretations. That is an asserted conclusion that AI has generated, right? It's an asserted conclusion that there are, in fact, challenges to traditional beliefs and new interpretations, right? So a person could read that and say, "Oh, wait a minute. You mean there are other interpretations that AI might know that I don't know, and the people that I've trusted forever, they don't know? Oh, that's intriguing. Let me start going down that pathway." That could be a good thing, or it might not be. What do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting it's an it's a really interesting question because what it automatically makes me think is if there are, I want to know. But if that's purely made up fiction,
Yeah,
I'd want to know it as fiction too. Or I want to know it as just something's projection.
yeah,
I mean, I'm okay entertaining anything. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I don't have a problem with entertaining uh, any of the thoughts that are out there on the edge that that the aliens landed on top of the pyramids and laid the eggs for the human race. I don't mind entertaining that thought. I mean, and it's plausible, and I don't mind talking and thinking about that
yeah,
at all. But I don't want, what I don't want is someone listening to something of that nature presented as fact.
yeah,
And I especially don't want people in a learning phase having something like that presented as fact. Um, I 100% believe that we all ought to be presented with all kinds of theories.
yeah,
Great, bring it on. Let's have that lively discussion about the creative possibilities of what life means.
yeah,
I don't mind that at all, and I think that's rich and that's helpful for anybody's religious traditions, uh, because I do think that with all of those creative things, you still come away with some basic truths. Like you and I talked before, that life is improbable,
mhm,
and yet we're here.
right,
That life involves pain and suffering, and we die.
mhm,
I mean, those things happen. We know all of that to be, we know that. We intuitively know that because we see it, we witness it. We also know that there can be happiness in life, and there can be joy, and there can be contentment. There can also be great sadness and sorrow in life. We know all of those things because we experience them.
yep,
So there are absolutes that we know happen because it is universal and we experience it. But the bigger questions, or the much broader questions, I don't mind if we discuss them, but don't present them to me as AI as though it's true.
yeah, right,
But please present to me anything as though, have you thought about this?
yeah,
No, I'm willing to think about it. But but as long as you bring me home,
yeah,
and as long as that discussion does not take someone without the stamina to have their own thought. And that's what concerns me, because somebody who's not well grounded,
mhm,
if they've wind up in that exchange and they place too much faith in that AI model, it can set them back in their pathway.
Right.
That would be my concern. And then how do we intervene to help that person progress? Uh, because they'll be on a pathway that's going to be, or potentially could be harmful to them in many ways. Not in many ways because they're going to find themselves ostracized by other people,
Yeah.
by those who could potentially be helpful to them. Um,
Yeah.
and they're going to find themselves in a position where I always think of things like Heaven's Gate, you know, suicide tragedy,
Yeah.
where
Exactly.
I mean, where
Yep.
Haley's Comet was going to come by and pick them up.
Yep.
Okay, well, now I know that had nothing to do with AI, but it had to do with somebody's crazy belief.
Yeah. Had to do with mind control.
That's true.
Right.
So I don't know that it's those kinds of things that actually concern me. That I want to make sure that what we create and release upon the world is safe. And I think that's what everyone is worried about. Of those that are worried about AI,
Yeah.
is they are worried about those extreme examples. Now, and I don't know of any that have happened. I I really don't, and I don't. But I'm afraid that one might. And I'm also um, I think the mission to me, when we ask that deep question about why am I here,
Yep.
um, well, I'm on a pathway. And sometimes I crawl and sometimes I make great strides. But I'm on this pathway to become all that I can be, to reach out to others around me, to
Yeah.
provide the help and assistance that I can. Uh, I mean, and no, I'm not there, but and I don't know when or if I'll get there. Here's the thing: I do know how to walk that path. I just don't know how long it'll take me.
Yeah.
And
But
I want to make sure people know how to walk that path to develop as a human.
right.
That's what I don't want people to get knocked off of.
Right. Yeah, and that to me, that's the important point. That's the important takeaway. It's your pathway. You're the one that's walking it. Like our old parents used to say. You used to walk to school uphill both ways in the snow and the rain and everything else, and there was a certain amount of truth to that, right? I think they had to be tougher, than what even our generation as boomers, and certainly tougher than what the current generation is. But there's this notion that I really liked what you said. Being on this pathway to be all that you can be. Um, I think that's part of something that's part of our human condition that hasn't been eroded, but I think it's been almost hijacked, right, with AI, because now people are saying, look, how can I train AI to think and create for me, right? Instead of how can I train myself to think and create myself? Right? Big difference, right? Those two pathways could start off with the same assumption. I want to be on a pathway where I can be all that I can be. We take the first step where maybe you and I would say, I need more training, right? I need more, awareness, knowledge, skills in order to progress on that pathway. And then another person says, oh, wait a minute, I've got the shortcut. All right, I'm going to take the first step toward AI. If I can develop a prompt that will allow me to be much more creative than what I could be, on my own, and not have to go through all of this trial and error and the pain and the suffering that comes along psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, right? I'm going to take the easy path. Well, I think the destination is going to be very, very different than if a person tries to do it through human potential rather than AI potential. I could be wrong, you know. I mean, I could be like, you know, just anachronistic. But I did have somebody say, well, look, you know, I mean, if you were back in 1903 and the Model A came along from Ford, would you not be the one to replace the horse with the Model A? And it's like it doesn't even make sense for an argument because if I were in 1903, I would see the Model A as a tool to help me get someplace where the horse maybe isn't going to be able to, right? Or a little faster, or I might even be more forward thinking, right? To think, there may be something beyond this. But nobody in 1903 would be thinking, I want this car to take over the wheel and drive me. No, I'm driving it, right? It's a vehicle to transport me where I want to go, not where it wants me to go. So again, I may be a dinosaur on my thinking with this, but that's, you know, that's my story and I'm sticking with it for right now.
Well, my fear trace is similar to what you're saying, because what AI theoretically is doing right now is it's accessing the knowledge of the world. So, in other words, it is accessing everything you and I have ever written
Correct.
that's available. Okay, so now I can go and I can ask it to write an essay, and it's accessing everything that's ever been written, including what you and I have written, and it writes an essay. Okay, so now if that's what happens to us, then think about it. Then we have stopped writing. Then its knowledge base is based on everything up to this point.
Yeah.
If we stop contributing as intelligent human beings to this world,
Yeah.
then it'll only be based on what has happened to this point.
Right.
And
Right.
that's my fear.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned to you before about college students now using AI to answer all their questions.
Yeah.
And I've even mentioned to you that universities are looking at how do we incorporate this into our classrooms?
Right.
Not how do we check to make sure students are doing their own work, but how do we incorporate this into our assignments, allowing them to use it?
Yeah.
Well, we're all falling into the same trap. So now we're going to teach them how to use AI, but then there's still, my fear is if we stop contributing, then it's only based on what's out there now. So are we saying that there's enough out there that the totality of human knowledge is there?
Yeah.
The totality of human knowledge to this point is out there and available. That's true for the most part. But is that all there is?
Yeah.
Because if that's true, then we can stop right now. And you're right, we can just learn how to develop prompts. And we
Yeah.
don't even have to do that because, by the way, you can ask ChatGPT what are
Exactly.
give me
Right.
good prompts, and it'll give you good prompts to ask itself.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's such a circular thing.
Yeah.
And if you don't like the limits that one gives you, you can just go get another one that uses the same system, but it manipulates it a different way and get it to write a book for you.
Right. Well, and two, I mean, we see, right? We see the psychology and the conditioning that's used for this, right? Saying it don't matter whether it's Las Vegas, Reno, you know, gambling or otherwise, or drugs, any other pathway that you want to lead a person to addiction, give them something for free, right? And as soon as they become addicted to that, all you got to do is just say, hey, look, right? If you pay 15 bucks a month, you're going to get so much more power, right? You're going to have so much more knowledge and information. I got to have that, right, to keep up with everybody else. Otherwise, I'm going to fall behind. All right, there's your 15 bucks. Now you get there, guess what? There's another carrot out there, right? Again, we are being manipulated, right? For the dollar, right? It is about the money. But it's what it really is doing, right, is just making people subordinate, right? It's making people subvert. Uh, uh, what's my word? I just locked up here, right? Yeah. So I mean, we are being controlled by something other than our own self, our own thinking, and so on. The other part on the deal with the writing, I think we talked about this last week or maybe the week before, but it used to be if we use spell check, okay, you use spell check, it's a tool. Then it went into like the first iterations of like Grammarly, right? So if you were sending something off, you wanted to make sure it was polished, right? Okay, fine, run the thing through Grammarly. But now you can run something through Grammarly. If it gets changed around, you can actually get a strike for your own creative work because AI has twisted that, right? Compared it to something else or brought something else in. Now all of a sudden you're plagiarizing your own work because AI has twisted something a little bit, right? So now we've got to cite AI as the source, not our own creative work. That part to me is insane, you know, right? You know, like it said, is it an ecclesiastic? There's nothing new under the sun,
That's right.
right? But what's new under the sun, right? Not that there is something out there that's new, but it's the human's perception. We've talked about qualia before. What is this experience like for me as a human being, right? It's more qualitative. It's not necessarily something you can quantify. But if we aren't doing our own thinking and our own creative writing, even though there's nothing new under the sun, we are missing something that is uniquely human, right? It is noetic. And that's the part I think with AI, unless there is some other spark from somewhere else that turns AI into a noetic being, it will always be less than, no matter how complicated, sophisticated it appears to be, and no matter how much it controls us, it will still be less than.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, I guess then to bring that all back, if we create the AI Buddha or Jesus, it'll always be less than
Yeah.
the original.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And then we go back to that original question. What's the worst thing that could happen if we're wrong? If we know that it's wrong, right, that it's always going to be less than. But if a faith tradition says, don't worship idols, well, from that faith tradition, there could be some real ramifications for being wrong, right? So again, everybody assumes their own risk, right? That's the other part of this that we, sometimes we forget. We want to have all of this freedom to choose as we want to choose, but then we don't want to have the responsibility that comes along with it. And I think that's where we're really heading. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to recognize, I wish I would have done some independent thinking. I wish I would have spent more time in developing my own mind and my own thought processes rather than taking the easy path and waiting for AI to think for me. I think our train wreck's coming.
Yeah, I do too. And I don't think it's not even it's not our kids, and maybe it's not even our grandkids.
Yeah.
We may be talking about our great grandchildren that really face the crisis with this technology.
Yeah.
It will be interesting from an academic standpoint to see what trials they face from this.
Yeah.
However, I think it's on us to begin that discussion.
Right. Right.
And that's
Yeah.
what we did.
Yeah, and exactly that's kind of what Nomads of the Noetic is about.
Right.
And as it continues to evolve, we're starting to find the things that really maybe are more than just academic discussions. Maybe there really is some meaning and purpose behind it that could have some, some, I don't know, maybe it could change some lives, right? Even if it's one, we get one person that thinks for themselves, not let AI do it. Hey, that's a win.
That's right. That's right. Well, Trace, what do you think?
I think we've done enough damage for today.
All right,
Hopefully,
sir.
hopefully we haven't triggered too many people.
We'll find out. Leave a
Exactly.
comment, subscribe,
You got it.
come back and see us.
Sounds good.
Oh,
Adios, everybody.
blessings.
Blessings to you all. Take care.